My name is Claire Ashworth. I am 31 years old, and I am a licensed forensic accountant with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit in Washington, D.C. I have spent the last 8 years learning how to find the lies people hide inside numbers. Ledgers don't blush, spreadsheets don't flinch. You can train yourself to read them the way other people read faces, and after long enough, you start to see the manipulation before the person even opens their mouth. Nothing I learned in 8 years of that work prepared me for what my older sister did at our mother's funeral. The service was held on a Saturday in November at St. Matthias Church in Falls Church, Virginia, the same church where my mother had volunteered every Thanksgiving for 22 years. The pews were full. My mother was the kind of woman people actually showed up for. She had worked as an ER charge nurse for 34 years, and half the people in that room had a story about a night she steadied them through something unbearable. I sat in the front left pew with my husband James. He works private security consulting now, but he spent 12 years before that as a special agent with the Secret Service. He has a gift for reading rooms quietly, the kind of awareness that doesn't announce itself. I had noticed him scanning faces since we walked in, which was unlike him at a family event. It put something cool at the base of my spine. Then his hand found mine under the program and he pressed something into my palm. I looked down. It was his secondary phone, screen lit. The message was already open. 4 words from a number I didn't recognize. Don't look at her. I didn't. I kept my eyes on the white lilies arranged around my mother's photo on the altar. In the photo, she was laughing, caught mid-sentence at some holiday dinner, her reading glasses pushed up into her hair the way she always wore them when she forgot to take them off. James leaned just slightly toward my ear. Your sister brought someone, he murmured. He's been filming since we sat down. My pulse didn't spike. That surprised me later when I replayed it. At the time, I simply felt something clarify, the way a room comes into focus when you finally turn on a lamp. I pressed reply on the phone and typed 2 words, do it. That was the signal we had agreed on 3 nights earlier, sitting at our kitchen table with the door locked and the blinds down, after James had shown me what he'd found. Within 30 seconds, I heard the sound of someone standing, then another, then 3 more in different corners of the church. James had asked 4 colleagues from his firm to attend as guests. They were dressed like ordinary people who had known my mother, and 2 of them had actually met her at our wedding 4 years ago, so the grief on their faces was real. They moved without rushing, each drifting toward a different person holding a phone, leaning in with a quiet word, a hand extended, a request made with such calm authority that the devices came away without a seam. The man my sister had brought, a thin guy in a gray blazer sitting 3 rows back on the right, handed his camera over before he even fully understood what was happening. James's colleague thanked him by name. He had looked him up the night before. I did not turn around. I kept my eyes on my mother's face in that photograph, and I thought, she would have handled this better than me. She would have forgiven faster. I was not there yet. I wasn't sure I would get there, but I could hold still, which is something she also taught me, though she called it patience and I've always called it strategy. My sister's name is Diane. She is 38, 7 years older than me, and she has always been the one in the room who knew exactly how much space she was taking up. When we were children, she was the louder one, the one who could make a dinner table laugh or go silent with equal ease. I grew up watching her and learning a different skill, how to be invisible when you needed to be, and unmissable when it counted. The tension between us had roots. I could trace the way I trace a fraudulent ledger, backward through years of small entries that compounded into something large. It wasn't one incident, it was a pattern. When I was accepted to George Mason on a partial scholarship, Diane told our extended family I had taken a spot from someone more qualified. When I passed my CPA exam on the first attempt, she told our aunt I had probably just gotten lucky with the questions. When I married James, she made a toast at the rehearsal dinner that technically congratulated me while managing to imply he had married beneath himself. She was good at that, the compliment that arrives carrying a knife. Our mother saw it. She never said so directly, but I knew she did. She used to call me on Tuesday evenings, always Tuesday, and at the end of every call she would say, your sister loves you in her own way, Claire. People love in the shapes their wounds allow. I wrote that down once. I still have it in my phone. 3 weeks before the funeral, my mother passed away after a brief and cruel recurrence of the ovarian cancer she had beaten 6 years earlier. She had updated her will the previous spring. The house in Falls Church, which she owned outright, was to be divided with 60% going to me and 40% to Diane, with the specific language that I was to have first right of refusal to purchase Diane's share at fair market value. The reasoning was stated plainly in a letter our mother had written to accompany the will. I had been her primary caregiver during the first cancer. I had driven the 4 hours round trip from DC every other weekend for 18 months. I had paid for the homemade when her insurance wouldn't cover it. Diane had visited twice. I learned about the will's contents the same day Diane did, at the attorney's office in Arlington. I watched my sister's face when the numbers were read. She nodded slowly, the way someone nods when they have already decided how they're going to respond to something and they're just waiting for the speaker to finish. She didn't say anything that day. She hugged me in the parking lot and said it had been a long afternoon. She smelled like her usual perfume, something expensive she had worn since her late 20s. I hugged her back and felt the particular sadness of loving someone you also cannot fully trust. 2 weeks later, James came home from a meeting with a former colleague and sat down across from me at the kitchen table with an expression I'd only seen him wear at work. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to listen all the way to the end before you react. Diane had hired a man named Preston to document me, not in any legal sense. What Preston did, according to James's source, was show up at events and capture whatever he could, then hand the footage to whoever had hired him to be shaped into a story. He had done it before in a custody dispute, in a wrongful termination case. He found the moment and made it legible to whatever narrative his client needed. If I cried too hard at the funeral, that was evidence of instability. If I didn't cry, that was evidence of callousness. Either way, she had her angle. The target was the will. Diane had spoken to her own attorney, who had apparently told her there was a slim but real avenue to challenge the distribution if she could establish that our mother's judgment had been unduly influenced during the period when I was her caregiver. They needed a portrait of me, something they could take to probate court and say, "Look at this woman. Look at how she behaves." I sat very still while James talked. I am good at sitting still. It is, in fact, my job. I find the hidden transaction, I document it carefully. I do not act on the information until I know what I have and what I can prove. "She's doing this at the funeral," I said when he finished. "Preston confirmed for Saturday," he said. I nodded once. Then I opened my laptop and started building the other side of the file. In the 8 years since the scene at the church, I had been asked more than once why I didn't simply confront Diane before the funeral. Why not call her directly? Why not send a cease and desist? The answer is the same one I give to newer analysts who want to move before the evidence is complete, because the confrontation is only as powerful as what you bring into it. An accusation without documentation is just noise. And noise, I have learned, benefits the person who was already planning to be loud, so I built a file. I documented the conversation James's contact had described. I contacted the property manager at the church to ask about the security camera coverage and learned that they had exterior footage going back 30 days. I sent a formal request to the probate court to place a preservation hold on all communications related to our mother's estate. I made notes in a separate encrypted folder. Each night that week, before I went to sleep, I reviewed what I had and marked what was still missing. The morning of the funeral, I wore my mother's pearls. She had given them to me 3 weeks before she died, pressed into my hand on a Tuesday, which was our day. She said, "These were my mother's, and now they're yours because you have her patience." I had not told Diane. It didn't seem relevant until it suddenly was. After the service, after James's colleagues had moved quietly through the church and the devices had been collected without a single raised voice, Diane walked out without speaking to me. Her heels on the stone floor of the vestibule sounded like punctuation. I heard the front doors open and close. I stayed until the last guest had gone. I helped carry a flower arrangement to the car of my mother's oldest friend, a retired nurse named Betsy, who had cried with a fullness that made the room feel real again. I thanked the priest. I straightened 2 chairs that had been pushed out of line. On the drive home, James drove, and I looked out the passenger window at the November trees. Virginia grows a particular gold in November that I have always loved. My mother used to call it the last argument the leaves make before they let go. I had never appreciated that phrase so much as I did that afternoon. She'll try again, I said. Probably, James said. Then we let her try, I said. And we document that too. 4 days after the funeral, I received an email from Diane's attorney, a woman at a firm in Tyson's Corner, requesting a meeting to discuss the possibility of an alternative arrangement regarding the estate distribution. It was phrased politely. Under the politeness was a structure I recognized from work, the opening offer before the escalation. I forwarded it to our estate attorney and wrote back a single sentence: "My attorney will be in touch." 2 days after that, a video appeared on a private Facebook group for people who had worked at my mother's hospital. I was not in the group. A former colleague of my mother's texted me a screenshot. The video was 40 seconds long. It showed a woman from behind, wearing a coat that looked like mine, standing over an open box. The woman picked up what appeared to be a nursing award plaque, the kind my mother had a shelf full of, and placed it in a garbage bag. A caption had been added: "This is how Claire Ashworth honors her mother's memory." I watched it twice. Then I closed it. The coat in the video was not mine. The box was not in any room I had ever been in. The woman was shorter than me by at least 2 inches, which anyone who knows me well would notice. But people in that Facebook group did not know me well. They knew my mother. And grief makes people reach for a story that explains why the world is cruel, even when the story is not true. Within an hour, the comment section had 40 replies. Most were confusion. Some were anger. 2 people tagged a local news reporter. I called James from my car in a parking garage and told him, "Send me the link," he said. His voice had gone to the flat professional register it goes to when he's working. "Already sent," I said. "I'll make some calls," he said. "I know," I said. "I sat in that parking garage for 7 minutes. I am precise about numbers. I counted my breath the way you count inventory, methodically, without attachment to what you find. Then I drove to the probate court and filed an amended preservation motion that now included social media content. The thing about building a case is that the other side almost always helps you. People who believe they are being clever tend to be thorough in ways that work against them. Diane had hired Preston, and Preston had a prior client, and that prior client had filed a complaint with the state licensing board 2 years earlier. The complaint was dismissed, but the record existed. James's former colleague had the name of the LLC Preston invoiced through. That LLC had a registered address that matched a suite shared with a paralegal who had recently left Diane's attorney's firm. I added each of these to the folder. I did not share them with anyone except our attorney. I labeled the folder with my mother's initials because the case was never really about me. The hearing was scheduled 5 weeks after the funeral in a conference room at the probate court in Arlington. I arrived 12 minutes early and arranged my materials in the order I would need them. Our attorney, a man named Howard Farr, who had been practicing estate law for 31 years and had the manner of someone who had seen every version of this fight, sat beside me with his own folder. Diane sat across the table with her attorney. She was wearing the gray blazer, which I noted without expression. She did not look at me when I came in. She looked at the window. The blinds were half drawn. Howard opened with the chain of documentation. He walked through the will, the accompanying letter, the record of my mother's care during the first cancer, and the financial records I had provided. Gas station receipts from 2 years of weekend drives, co-pay receipts from my mother's oncology appointments, a bank record showing the wire transfer I had made to cover 3 months of homemade costs when insurance lapsed. Then he presented the Facebook video alongside the security footage I had requested from the church's exterior cameras, which showed Preston arriving 40 minutes before the service and meeting briefly with a woman in the parking lot. The woman was wearing the same gray coat visible in the background of a photo on Diane's Instagram page from the previous February. The coat detail mattered less than the meeting. The meeting established coordination. Howard let the timestamps speak without editorializing. Diane's attorney objected twice. Both objections were overruled. Then Howard placed a printed call log on the table. Diane's cell phone, according to records obtained through our amended preservation motion, had placed 14 calls to Preston's business line in the 3 weeks between our mother's death and the funeral. The last call was made the morning of the service at 8:47 a.m., 1 hour before the doors opened. The mediator, a retired judge named Hartwell who had been brought in at Howard's request, leaned forward and asked a single question. He asked Diane's attorney whether her client disputed the timestamps. There was a pause. The pause lasted long enough that the answer became clear before any words were spoken. Diane did not look at the window anymore. She looked at the table. I watched her profile, the particular set of her jaw that I had known since I was a child, and I felt the same complicated grief I had been carrying since November. She was my sister. She had been my sister my whole life. She had also done this. Both things were true, and they sat in me the same way two columns in a ledger sift together, not cancelling each other out, just coexisting, each one accurate. The hearing recessed for 20 minutes. When we came back, Diane's attorney requested permission to confer privately with her client. That conference lasted 11 minutes. I counted. When they returned, Diane's attorney stated that her client was withdrawing the challenge to the will's distribution and would not pursue further legal action related to the estate. She also agreed on the record that the Facebook video had been posted without authorization and that her client would cooperate with a formal retraction request to the group's administrator. Howard accepted this without celebration. He thanked the mediator. He shook Diane's attorney's hand with the professional warmth of a man who has done this many times and will do it many more. In the hallway afterward, I stood at a water fountain and drank a small cup of cold water, the kind that comes from the paper cone dispenser, which I've always found oddly comforting in courthouses. Diane came out a minute after me. Her attorney had stayed inside. We were alone in the hallway for the first time since our mother had died. She stopped about 4 feet away. She looked older than I expected, which was strange because I had just seen her across a table for 2 hours. But something had shifted in her posture, and it changed her face. I needed to feel like she saw me, she said. Her voice was flat, which meant it was honest. When Diane performs, her voice has a particular warmth to it. This was the other register. I held the paper cup. I did not say anything right away, because the right answer required more than a reflex. She did see you, I said finally. She just saw us differently. She trusted you more. She knew me differently, I said, because of what I showed up for. That was not cruelty. I want to be clear about that. It was the truth, delivered without decoration, which is how I believe the truth should be delivered between people who are old enough to receive it. Diane had not come to Falls Church when our mother was sick. She had come for Christmas. She had come for the birthday dinner in August of the year before last. She had sent flowers when the cancer returned and a fruit basket 3 weeks later. These were not nothing, but they were not the same as being there at 2 in the morning when the pain was bad and our mother needed someone to hold her hand and tell her she was not afraid, even when she was. Diane looked at the door to the conference room. I could see her deciding something. I don't know how to talk to you, she said. I know, I said. I'm not sure I know how to talk to you either, but I'm willing to try. Not today, but eventually. She nodded once, the way you nod when something is true and not yet manageable. Her attorney came out and touched her elbow and guided her toward the elevator. Diane did not look back. I finished my water. I threw the cone cup in the trash and stood alone for a moment in that clean, fluorescent, forgettable courthouse hallway, and I let myself feel the full weight of all of it. The loss of my mother, the damage Diane had done, the months it had taken to document it, the strange, exhausted relief of having the facts finally confirmed in a room with a neutral party and a recorder. Relief is not the same as happiness. I want to say that clearly because I think sometimes when people tell stories like this, they end at the courthouse door with their arms raised. My arms were not raised. I was tired in the particular way you get when you have been holding tension in your body for a long time and it is finally allowed to release. The estate closed 8 weeks later. I bought Diane's share of the house at fair market value, as the will had intended. A real estate appraiser came on a Wednesday morning, walked through the rooms where my mother had lived for 19 years, wrote a number on a form, and left. I sat in my mother's kitchen after he went and drank coffee out of the mug she had bought at a gift shop in Williamsburg, Virginia, one of 4 identical mugs she had in the cabinet that she used every day and refused to replace even when they chipped. I have that mug now. I use it on Tuesdays. Settling the house took longer than the legal fight. There were 19 years of objects to sort, a task that is really just another form of documentation, cataloging what a person was by what they chose to keep. My mother kept every card any of us had ever made her, sorted by sender in labeled folders. 12 years of nurses' journals written in her careful hand. A shoebox of photographs organized by decade. A crocheted blanket she had made during her first cancer treatment and never finished, left in the basket beside the couch. I kept the blanket. I have not finished it. I might. There is one more thing I want to say, because it has stayed with me in a way the courtroom did not. 6 weeks after the hearing, I received a card in the mail, handwritten, Diane's handwriting, which I would know anywhere because she crosses her sevens and nobody else I know does that. She wrote, I know what I did. I'm not sure I can explain it in a way that would make sense yet. I'm working on that. I wanted you to know that the house, what you did for her, it mattered, even when I didn't say so. She signed it with her name, just her name, no love, which was honest. We are not at love yet, we are at names. I put the card in the folder I had been keeping since November, behind the probate documents and the security footage requests and the call logs and the care receipts and the copy of my mother's letter, the one where she explained what she had decided and why. The card is the last document in that folder. I think I will leave it there until we are ready to open a different kind of file. Before I sign off tonight, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Are you in a quiet house after everyone else has gone to sleep, or in a car in a parking lot where you needed a few minutes to yourself? Drop a comment and tell us. We read every one. If this story stayed with you, please consider subscribing to Revenge Unraveled. Not because we are interested in anger, but because we are interested in what people do when they refuse to let someone else write their story for them. We will see you in the next one. Take care of yourself tonight. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that November. Not in any abstract way, I mean the very specific, traceable kind. The kind I work with every day. Every action in a ledger has a corresponding entry. Nothing appears from nowhere. Everything that happened between me and my sister had a record behind it, even the parts neither of us ever wrote down. Diane made a choice. She made it while our mother was still warm in the ground, which is the part I have had to sit with the longest. But here is what I have come to understand about that choice. It didn't come from nowhere either. It came from years of feeling invisible in a family, where love was real, but not always evenly distributed, where a father's early death had left a mother stretched thin between two daughters who needed different things, and where one of those daughters, me, had a way of being present that looked, from the outside, like being preferred. I didn't earn the 60% because I was loved more. I earned it because I showed up more. That distinction matters enormously, and it is one my mother understood, and Diane for a long time could not. What I keep returning to is this. The moment Diane decided to hire Preston, she had already lost. Not because I was smarter or better prepared, though I was prepared. She lost because the strategy she chose required the truth to be something other than what it was. And the truth, in my experience, does not negotiate. You can delay it, you can obscure it. You can spew it 40 seconds of footage and add a caption and watch it spread across a Facebook group in an afternoon. But the truth has timestamps, it has metadata, it has a chain of custody. It has receipts sitting in a folder on my laptop labeled with my mother's initials, waiting patiently for the moment when someone in the conference room decides to look. I am not a person who believes that doing the right thing guarantees a clean outcome. I have seen too much fraud go unpunished, too many careful lies survive scrutiny. What I believe is that integrity is the only foundation that holds weight over time, not because the universe rewards it. That's too simple. But because every decision you make either builds your record or damages it, and eventually you have to stand behind that record in a room with other people looking at it. Claire held, Howard held, James's people held. And on the other side of the table, Diane's house of cards held exactly as long as houses of cards hold, which is until the first real wind. The card she sent me 6 weeks later, the one with her handwriting and the crossed sevens, that is the part I think about most. Not the courtroom, not the timestamps, not the moment her attorney said withdrawing the challenge, the card, because it meant that somewhere inside what she had done was a person who still knew the difference between a wrong turn and a destination. She hadn't settled into it yet. She was still capable of the hardest thing, which is not winning or losing, but looking clearly at yourself and writing down what you see. That's what I want to say to anyone carrying something like this right now. Build your record, not for a courtroom. Most of us will never need one. Build it because the discipline of documenting what is true, of choosing facts over noise, of waiting for the right moment instead of reacting in the wrong one, that discipline is what keeps you from becoming the thing you're fighting against. Diane came after me with a fabricated video. I came back with receipts. The difference between those two approaches is not just tactical, it is the whole story of who we were in that season and who we wanted to be on the other side of it. I used my mother's mug this morning, Tuesday. I thought about her the way I always do, the way that doesn't hurt less but fits better now, the way grief eventually learns to sit down and stay without knocking everything over. She would have found a way to forgive faster than me. I'm still working on it, but I'm working on it honestly, which I think she would have accepted.